I would like to talk through for the next few minutes some ideas related to learning and teaching remotely. Now, what I'm placing down on the desk, these are some museum pieces from the mid to late 1990s that I developed. Now, the actual resources probably wouldn't be used anymore. They are definitely more suitable for a museum. However, I wanted to just talk through, using these as an example, what's going on with learning and teaching, and how does that relate to learning design and some of the options that are still highly applicable today in our online, using this sort of device for our learning. So what we're looking at, these are some units of work, actually 12 weeks worth of work for agriculture students, year 9 and 10 agriculture students. These were developed when I worked at the Learning Materials Production Centre, which is part of the, the New South Wales Department of School Education, as it was. And then this organisation, O10, that still exists. That's more part of TAFE now. However, there was a whole specialist unit that existed long before I arrived that would develop these materials, because what they found was there were lots of students that couldn't get to a school, and so they would do all of their learning. Some students did every single subject, whereas where I was working, my students would do just one or two subjects, and so I taught agriculture, science, and other kind of related, geology. But we were heavily reliant on the system worked because I, as the teacher, would post out, here's my little envelope as a prop, I would post out to the students pieces of learning. And you can see here, there's lots of stuff in them. Now, significantly, we'll go through these in a minute, but they're not just all this content that's just, here, read this. They might as well pick up a textbook if they want to do that. So this is how a teacher structures learning, which is the pedagogy. Now, you might think, well, how can you structure learning when it's just a printed booklet? But there are instructions. I guess that's where the instructional design, learning design comes in. Now, it's important to note these are before the internet. This is how students at a correspondence school would do their learning. And so I started out as a teacher, so I would just grab these sorts of units and post them out, but then I got into the actual development, which was really great. And that's when I first began my e-learning kind of journey, I guess, before e-learning existed. So we like to keep the pedagogy up front. So what do we mean by that? Well, one of the key principles, I might just give myself some room here. One of the key principles in pedagogy is to keep it super clear for the learner. And that means establishing our expectations. So as the teacher, what do we expect of our students? So if we're in a classroom, we'd just tell them, we'd just outline them. But whereas here, we've outlined it about this unit, and it doesn't have to be, it's not, unpleasant. Raising chooks can be fun. So it's like a little textbook, but it's specifically designed for teaching. And so here we're outlining, and I mean, keep in mind, this is a combination of print material with the teacher. They do have their teacher, but the teacher's not there all the time. So that brings in a very real conversation about asynchronous delivery, because in this instance, the bulk of their learning is asynchronous. The teacher is not there. So again, I know this is like a museum piece. However, we're not here to look at this as a kind of a viable option for learning. I just wanted to use it almost like as its own metaphor, its own example of how to embed pedagogy into remote learning. So one of the key things is to establish your expectation for your learners. So here we've got it as a one-pager. It might be in a phone call to the student. If we're doing it on this sort of device, or the computer, e-learning, now you might communicate that in lots of different online environments. Here's some more, everything's structured. So again, I didn't invent this sort of approach. I learned a lot by working there. But essentially, the key to unlocking a lot of this territory, remote learning, is to structure everything, but have flexibility for the student. So the student doesn't get lost. They know where they're at. So we've got these sort of things. Here, we know that Poultry 1, which is this booklet, is made up of 3 parts, and each part is 1 week. So it's nice and clear, super clear. And part of that is these learning outcomes, what you will learn. So here they're all listed. This looks like something that the student might flick past, and they may very well flick past it. However, we've communicated that to the student. Keep a record of all your costs, submit an agriculture agreement, organise your job timetable. These are like little checklists. This by far is the biggest thing, I believe, the biggest sort of approach, biggest pedagogical strategy to keeping students on task remotely. When they're learning remotely, they've got a list of things to do and they can tick them off. One of those items was a agriculture agreement. Because we're dealing with live animals, we're not going to just give them instructions and off they go. Here we need evidence that they've thought about it and they've planned it out. We've even got the parent guardian signature. So everything is super clear and it's considered and planned and designed. So here's our table of contents. Week 1, week 2, week 3. We've structured it so that we know how much time it will take them approximately. So we don't want to overburden the student, but we want to keep them as busy as possible, but not just busy work. We need it to be relevant and, again, helping them to achieve these learning outcomes. Now, the learning outcomes in the third part, which is large-scale commercial enterprises, they're quite different. These learning outcomes relate to things like creating a survey, and they've got to design and carry out a survey, which is pretty sophisticated. So we don't just ask them to do it, we scaffold it for them so that it's really, really clear. Where is that survey? Here's the beginning bit of, where are we? I saw it earlier. So you can probably see it's a combination of content, photos, all these little formative assessment opportunities. There's an authentic article. There's a little bit about their deconstructing. Where did the article come from? What type of language is used? A little bit of critical literacy. A little bit of kind of finance, typical costs. There's some graphs and charts. So they're all kind of activities that are helping the students to build their knowledge and skills and help them to achieve their learning outcomes. I just wanted to show you I've gone past it, I think. There they are. Here's all these different people. They've got different opinions about what chicken they like, but then that relates specifically to, here's Mr. Chicken says, how do these chicken products relate to the farmer growing broilers? Because it's an agriculture unit, it needs to link back to, in this case, it's a learning outcome related to consumer preferences. And so they've got some questions in an activity here. If we were to reconceive this in a contemporary environment that might work on this sort of device, e-learning, using the computer, this might be that they're learning how to do a survey, but then they might actually record that survey on a mobile device, and then that becomes a formative assessment task or something like that. But in this 1990s print version, all they're doing is they're reporting on their survey findings and sending it back to their teacher. And then these hand-in exercises are at the back. Where are we? There's suggested answers, so they can self-check. So that's another form of feedback for the student. The teacher doesn't need to be there for that. And the teacher does need to be reading these send-in exercises. So the teacher would typically get those back, and then they're checking to see that the student's on track. And then they might have a follow-up phone call. So again, these could easily be reconceived for online, but there's only about a zillion more possibilities online. So there's also this idea of engagement. So we engage our students with this little secret weapon. I'm just going to play a little bit. Oh. Just be gentle.
The other sex of the layer hens, and they were then grown out and sold. A lot of those birds were just sold in the open Sydney markets on a totally different setup to what we've got now, with the large numbers of birds going for processing.
Okay, so the farmer is a real farmer in a real location, and we're not just handing that to the students saying, "I listen to it." In fact, there's no reference, from what I remember, to that in the first module. It's really only there it is, there's one opportunity. They're only listening to a little bit of it as well, and they're answering questions, and they've got opportunity to check their answers as well. So these are all essentially asynchronous moments that have been specifically designed so that the student can be kept busy learning, essentially. But there is that kind of skill involved in getting organised for remote learning, but this is what we're dealing with in a lot of ways in our current situation. And so we're also I won't go into the actual detail, but we're drawing on students' known experiences with a lot of this learning and teaching, and we've got lots of flexibility. They can they've got options for different types of activities. When they want to do that activity, they can check with their teacher. And so basically, I'll just wrap it up just with some of the ideas that make remote learning more successful, is to ensure that your expectations are really clear, that your learning outcomes, I've lost the learning outcomes, they are the learning outcomes. Here's the expectations, and then the learning outcomes are super clear so that it's not ambiguous. The student can check readily what they need to be doing, when they need to be doing it. I like this is an overview of a timeline. Here's week 12, here's week 0, here's week 3, this is what happens in week 3. It's all these aspects. So it's all super clear for the students. There's also lots of reflection, lots of questions throughout. How are you going with the birds? Do you, does this suit your needs? Or all these kind of reflection questions, some of which are built in, some of which they really do need to contact their teacher So again, there's lots of parallels with online approaches. There's no interaction significantly. The students in these modules have very little interaction with other students. However, that's a definite limitation to this approach. However, in this era of online learning, there's heaps of opportunity through forums, learning management systems, Zoom sessions. So that's definitely something that's emerged over the last 25 years with with technology. But some of the fundamentals are still in place. There's lots of scaffolding that's important. Scaffolding, and the students are just not left to just read stuff. They've kind of, their skills are developed slowly throughout, or they're given opportunity to practice and then apply their new skills to a new situation. So I think I might leave it there. So hopefully this has just given me, well, apart from a trip down memory lane, it's given a bit of an overview as to how a distance or a remote learning, piece of remote learning may have been developed. And there's some feedback on the final activity. What did you like? What did you not like? How much did you like the units? Booklets? Any suggestions for improvement? Thanks for listening.